I think we see Willis coming out. Here comes Willis.
Welcome to the Mecca Respect. We deserve that. Willis, Reed, Walt, Clyde, give them a slow clap. From the Pearl to Patrick, and they should know that. This is the
Knicks throwback.
Houston's Bree, Starks, Oaks, and Mace. Melo and the King getting buckets in your face. When LJ hit the three, we ain't really know how to act. Through the history almanac, this the
Knicks throwback.
What's up, guys? Special holiday, end of decade, whatever you want to call it, edition of Terry and Trey. I got two Knick experts here. Don't look around, Alex. You're an expert. All right, you got Jeremy Cohen from Knicks Film School. What's up? How you doing?
Doing great. How you doing?
Doing excellent work. Definitely check out the podcast. Links will be below. We got Alex Wolfe of everything, posting and toasting, Locked On Knicks, Sports Illustrated now. This guy's big time. I don't know how I secured him.
Oh, jeez. Stop it. You flatter me.
Oh, get this guy. So how are you guys feeling in general at the end of the decade? I mean, one question I want to ask is, you can see where this is going, guys. One question I really want to ask is, was this decade worse or better than the decade before?
Better. No doubt.
Better.
Yeah. Better.
Okay.
Better. Absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
Yes.
So the reason I ask, the 2000-2010 was basically where we started to become the franchise we're known for today. Ineptitude, bad decisions, confusion, just all around horrible. And there's some horrible off-the-court things and on-the-court things that happened in 2000s. But as a franchise, we weren't as disrespected yet. The 2010s was where I really saw just the general NBA community the early 2000s, I think there was a sense that, the Knicks probably will be back to being at least decent. But, how do you sum up the last decade?
I would say, mixed bag.
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah.
There was some, historic futility, but also some relatively historic highs.
Yeah.
2012-13, which we'll talk about at some point during this, was a really high point as a Knicks fan for me personally, who got into the team in '99. So that was great. But then obviously you set the futility mark twice. There's only so much you could take away from that. There's drafted franchise cornerstones, traded franchise cornerstones. I don't know, a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah, lots to unpack there, Jeremy. Your thoughts just kind of on the decade.
Yeah, I'd say overpromise, underdeliver.
Ooh.
I don't know, maybe it was us, maybe it just was...
It was us three.
It was just the three of us.
three.
We're responsible for all of it. But just the sort of thing where there were so many moments where things felt like they could get really high and we were excited for them, and then we experienced the lowest of lows. As you're saying, twice in the same decade. So there were really some great moments. It's just a shame because it feels like the negative can sometimes overweigh it.
As it often does in Knick land. But we're going to start with a player who I don't think is polarized anymore. Lance Thomas. Kind of the longest. Is he? He was with us for a long time. Great guy off the court. Fishing, really cool. I love his fishing. Love his effort. Yeah, I think Fizz called him Draymond Green for us at one point. So, but in a weird way, kind of representative of the menace of the franchise for the decade. If you kind of think about it.
Fizz calling him Draymond Green explains a lot about Fizz too.
Oh.
Yeah.
If we may, quickly.
Yeah, if we may.
But Lance was. He was a good vet who was relied upon to do too much. I feel bad for putting him on the bad list, quite frankly, because he was a good guy.
Yeah,
he was given the contract he was given, and even then it wasn't. And it didn't set the franchise back or anything.
But he was bad.
Exactly,
he was a bad player. He got given a role player's contract. He was a good defender for a year or two, and that was about it.
Yeah, he had a plantar fasciitis, which as I learned about it from him, how bad it really is. I know how much that had to do with his play, but kind of like Ron Baker too, right? Ron Baker, another guy who somehow is always going to be remembered in the 2010s as a guy who effort was there, but obviously not that talented, and both of them kind of got contracts they did not deserve.
Oh, Baker's, but I would say that Lance earned his deal more than.
Did,
to be honest. If we want to give Lance credit for one thing, he earned his deal more than Ron Baker.
He didn't get a player option either. Or no trade clause by default, thanks to the CBA.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Franchise player Ron Baker.
Yeah.
Let's move on to, it's funny, it was a moment in a great season. Things were going impeccably well. And then this kind of almost derailed things, and then in the end it kind of did. So we're up 3-0 on the Celtics in the 2013 playoffs, 2012-13 season where we were incredible. And JR, elbow, comes out. Was it Jason Terry? Yep.
Elbow
and
Jason Terry, like in the
then he's
head.
out of the club at Rihanna. His focus isn't there. Has a pretty bad Pacers series overall. Kind of, what are your thoughts about JR during that time?
I mean, I don't think I feel like if we're going to mention JR, we should also mention Tyson Chandler, too, in that same year, because he disappeared in the Pacers series as well.
Totally.
Two guys that were so key to that year just completely disappeared. And Jason Kidd, too. I mean, there was just... But Jason Kidd was like, I think he just ran out of steam.
Yeah.
But JR and Tyson, there was no excuse.
Jason Kidd retired 2 weeks before the end.
Yeah,
I think he made a shot for like the last whatever.
Yeah, I mean, he retired about 60 games into the season.
Yeah.
I think, 'cause he couldn't make anything the end of the year. He still was making good plays and stuff. But yeah, I JR and Tyson definitely deserve a lot of culpability for that team not ending up as a potential
Eastern
Conference
finalist.
Finals team and maybe an NBA Finals team, depending on how they played.
Yeah, Jeremy.
Against
Yep.
the Heat.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, so I was actually at the game, the MSG game. I was thinking, great, gonna get tickets, see them clinch, it's gonna be fantastic. And I was expecting confetti, and it definitely didn't happen. And it was so disappointing to see that occur. Not so much the loss, but it really felt like JR lost it to the point where he was such a liability that when arguably when your best bench player is not able to really do anything, you're going to have a bad time. And it certainly felt that way. And sure, yeah, as you're saying, like, they went 3-1 against the Heat. The Pacers series is just...
I hate thinking about it.
I know.
I hate thinking about it. JR that year, 6th man of the year. I think that was also the year he had the back-to-back game winners. So it was almost like JR had been such a joke, generally speaking, in the NBA until that year. He came back from China the Linsanity year. Was you saw some signs that he improved, that got a bit more mature. But that season he really put it together.
And then won 6th man of the year.
And once everything's on point, and then you have him throwing this elbow, and it felt like, oh God. We're back. He's back, and the Knicks are back to that version of the Knicks. And you can't blame him for the Pacers series because obviously, like we said, Tyson just let Roy Hibbert do whatever he wanted to him, and we'll get into that Pacers series as well. But it felt like that was like a beginning to me of like feeling iffy about it because at that point we were up 3-0. It's like, oh my God, it's incredible. If I remember correctly, we lost 2 games in a row, and it got to 3-2, and you kind of felt like, oh no, are they gonna do this?
Yeah.
So. Moving on, and more Pacers pain, and it's a fundamental point for me because I feel like so many things, like a big bang for me. This happened, and careers went sideways, franchises went different directions. Carmelo Anthony getting blocked by Roy Hibbert trying to dunk the ball. Was it Game 5?
That was the clinching game.
It was a clinching game.
Game 6.
Game 6.
Yeah.
Jeremy, just that moment.
Yeah. 2 careers were forever altered. It seemed like Roy Hibbert peaked and Melo started to descend. And it's just, you could feel the air leave the room for the Knicks. And it was awful because
that was on the road, correct?
It was on the road. It was in Indiana.
So, I mean, if
Conseco Fieldhouse.
Because they were, if I remember right, the Knicks were still down by like 2 points, 4 points, something like that at that juncture. Right. Melo goes up for that dunk. If he would have hit that, the Knicks were on a run because they were on a comeback in that game. If he hits that, then the Knicks would have had all the momentum. They would have absolutely won that game, no doubt in my mind. Like the Pacers would have been destroyed if that happened. And then, the Knicks probably could have won that series because they would have been coming home and they would have had the Garden crowd behind them and everything else, and then probably would have won it in Game 7. Instead, Hibbert pulls off maybe one of the best blocks. If we're talking about the decade, probably one of the best blocks and most memorable of the decade. And the Pacers get to the Eastern Conference Finals, get their asses handed to them by the Heat. And the rest is history.
The rest is history. It felt like, it was an incredible block, like you said. Yeah. It also felt like, to your point with Melo kind of declining, I remember that being the first real time I'm like, oh, Melo can't jump like he used to. Like, it just hit me on that one play. Not that, he was pretty athletic earlier. He might have
body was
it.
messed up, though, that season, man. He had, in that first round, he was wearing that, full compression thing. Because,
the thing that made him look fat?
Yes, because Kevin Garnett tried to rip his arm out of his socket in the first round, remember? That was... Cheerios. Yeah, Melo was broken that playoffs. I felt bad for him because he left it. you could say a million things about Melo in his time with the Knicks, but that year, and particularly that series, he left. And honestly, anytime the Knicks were in the playoffs, he left it all out there in every single game. And he really got screwed by his supporting cast a lot of times in the playoffs because he played like a different player in the playoffs. And especially that 2012-13, I thought he really took over.
He did. So. He took the mantle on. That's what, a lot of Melo's time in New York has been revisited, I guess, post him leaving and some of the KP stuff, and also, him not being in the league. I genuinely think the perception of Melo has risen a lot since he's left. But I think with that has come the analysis that, a lot of the things he was blamed for, while maybe it was his fault in specific instances, he was really kind of carrying a team and a franchise that were not helping him a lot of the time.
I think he was just an accessory to a lot of things. Yeah, was
there you go.
The reality of it.
Melo, Alex has forgiven you for any transgressions.
I never.
Oh, look, he's taking himself away. He was never. We always
I was pretty much always in his corner. Yeah,
okay,
you can check the PNT comment sections. I was a Melo stan. I was towards the end. I knew it was time for him to go.
Right.
It was like a amicable split. I was like, it's just time. Like it's time for him to move on, for us to move on, whatever. But even up until the Rose year,
right?
All that, I was still like, I think Melo maybe still has something left in the tank. He could still do this, and obviously he couldn't quite. But that had a lot more to do with Rose and Noah and everything that year than him. But I still thought I was still behind him right up until he left. I never really
heard it from the person himself. I was iffy. I was
on the fence. I recognized his flaws. I recognized he wasn't trying on defense, stuff like that.
Right? Yeah,
and that definitely happened. But he needed that reality check that he's now had that now he has in Portland, and now he's playing a lot better defense and everything else.
And the reluctance to really play the four. That's another thing. And then of course the Knicks brought in more guys who were capable of playing the four, which also shifted things down. But it's it almost felt like it takes two to tango here. So Melo, your career will benefit from this, and he just didn't really want it.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Because going back to 2012-13, we get into that more later. But Melo plays the four because Amari's out. That kind of basically starts that whole thing. But we're going to get into 2012-13 later. Let's move on. They say nepotism runs the world and CAA runs the Knicks. Creative Artists Agency. I forget all the time, but it was bad. You had a situation where basically, I know a player pretty much came out anonymously and said, anyone signed with CAA is just getting better treatment. They can talk to the coaches how they want. They're getting it from up top. Remember Woodson switching over to creative artists. So just your thoughts on, and it talks to the ineptitude of the franchise. As annoyed as we get with some of the reports sometimes, when you see things like this, or even McKinsey when they came in that year, I'm like, why are these things happening? Your thoughts on CAA and their whole impact on the New York Knicks?
Yeah, nepotism can sometimes work. This time was not one of those times. Of course, we can point to Chris Smith being the marquee reason for why it's a flawed situation. Chris Smith didn't make or break the decade for this team, but it just goes to show that it's really it's more of a symptom as opposed to a disease standpoint. The disease is the fact that CAA has gotten such a stronghold with the organization that they can really do whatever. And if your business impacts the other business, that's certainly a negative if you have products like Chris Smith or even Ron Baker with CAA.
He was. I forgot.
Yeah.
Tricky Ron.
May I ask real quick, do you know what the saddest thing about betrayal is? It never comes from an enemy.
That hurt deep. I'm like, I don't even know which Nick moment you're talking about. You say that could be every Nick.
That's JR's meme, man.
Yeah.
When after Chris Smith got released, I still have it saved on my phone to this day, and I use it constantly. The screenshot specifically of his Instagram account with his name over top. The really shitty meme that he had that was like, it was from, I think like an Audrey Hepburn movie. I don't even know
J.R. Smith, movie connoisseur.
Yeah, I don't even know where the quote came from, but it was like, I think it's like Audrey Hepburn and Robert De Niro or something. And it says, what the saddest thing about betrayal is? It never comes from an enemy. And he tweeted that out right after his brother got released. And that's always stuck in my mind as one of the funniest Knicks moments in ever. It was so funny. But yeah, CAA, man. because they had Melo as a client as well.
Right, yep.
They had Melo, they had JR, they had, trying to think. Amari wasn't part of them. Amari had Happy Walters or whatever.
He was with Happy Walters, I remember that.
But he was like cool with them, I guess. I don't know.
It was insidious. That's what it felt like.
I think Kmart was with CAA.
I think Kmart was as well. Yeah, I think Kmart was.
But that worked out pretty good. There were some guys that worked out with, some guys that didn't. The other thing with CAA is that they represented Irving Azoff and the Eagles. Right. Who then had the whole thing with James Dolan got introduced to Irving Azoff by the Eagles. And then Irving Azoff introduced him to Phil Jackson. who then eventually put Phil Jackson in charge of the Knicks. So that's another CAA special right
And now
there.
we're seeing something similar. It's not CAA, but with Priority Sports. A lot of Bartlestein clients are on the Knicks.
Yeah.
So it feels like kind of shifting in one direction to the other where, we saw what happened before, and now we're seeing the roster right now.
Exactly, but like you said as well, right? It's kind of weird because it can work really well, but as things often do with this franchise, it didn't. You know what else didn't work well? Kristaps Porzingis. This is it's one of the most, regardless of your feelings about KP right now, I think it's important with Porzingis to look at the entirety of everything that happened, which we will do. Let's run through from the beginning to basically the end. He is we start with that draft. It's Phil's draft. Was it his first draft?
Yeah.
First full draft, right?
Yeah.
Where he had like
No, you know what? He made the Cleanthony early. It was
Right.
his first draft.
Okay,
Put it in,
right.
yeah.
He made the Cleanthony early and
He did the
Thanasis
early one.
Antetokounmpo picks.
Yes,
because
they
he got
did.
hired midway through that season, but the KP draft was his first
round.
First
And also
round
first like high pick, like you know what I mean, really his decision.
Yeah.
I remember I said I was in a bar in DC and when they drafted him I said, oh no, we drafted the Latvian stick. I remember saying that. I had Frederick Weiss like, PTSD. But he drafted, there's the booing, there's the, I'm gonna make these guys proud, there's his rookie season, and just how do you even, let's stick to the beginning with KP. What were your thoughts kind of around the draft when we got him and how he started the year and like the expectations for him that kind of bloomed from that?
In the very beginning, I was admittedly scared off. The idea of like, okay, well, this guy I've never heard of. We know what the stigma is with tall European players. Just a lot of European players, or at least unless they're drafted by Greg Popovich, in which case they're likely amazing. But I want to say that around a few days before the draft actually occurred, I was like, you know what? I've seen enough of this guy where I feel confident. I like what he can do. I like the potential here. He can space the floor. He can block shots. Maybe there's more to his game, and especially we thought of it at the time as a 3-man draft. So it's like, well, at that point you got to go best player available. I mean, you should go best player available most likely anyway. But if the top 3 guys are going to be gone, he seems like the highest potential. And then of course we're seeing moments, and we'll get into it in the better stuff as well. But for me, it was really when he stole the ball from Paul Millsap and then in transition and dunked it. I thought like. It's
the
just,
Hawks, right?
Yeah.
The kind of spin. I remember that moment.
And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, this
Left
guy
out
feels
Horford
like
in
he's
the dust.
yeah.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like this guy feels like he's here to stay and he's very good. And he's good, not here to stay.
You're
If I may give myself credit for something again, I didn't boo him at the draft. I was at that draft. I made a point to get tickets. I remember.
Was that Barclays or had they already?
Barclays.
They
Yeah, it
already
was at
moved to
Barclays.
Barclays. Okay, cool.
So I can perfectly remember the energy in the room too, because going in, I was like, I think the Knicks might get D'Angelo Russell, and I was really excited.
That he
about
might have
prospect.
fallen, right?
Because I thought what was going to happen was Towns was going to go 1, and then the Lakers were going to take Okafor.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, then that sets up the Sixers to take Porzingis because he could go potentially well with Noel and Embiid. And then the Knicks will get Russell, because why would this at the time, I think the Sixers had Michael Carter-Williams coming off of his rookie year
that
season.
rookie year when you thought he was just going to
he was going to be good. So
they already
wouldn't-
had their PG
So
of
they
the
wouldn't
future.
go point guard, right?
Right.
And so then the draft happens, and the whole time I'm like, yeah, come on, give me Russell, and if not Russell, then somehow Okafor. That's what I was hoping for. And so Towns goes first, and then Russell goes second, and everybody's like, oh, all right. And then we're like, oh, well, the Sixers, the process, they're going to go with Porzingis because he's more of a project, and Okafor is more of a sure thing, and the Knicks are going to get Okafor, and life is going to be great.
And that was amazing back then.
Yeah.
Jaleel Okafor?
Oh, if you could have gotten Okafor, you'd be like
you big
forget
man,
it.
you Patrick Ewing.
Exactly. Like
The Knicks are back.
Yes, exactly. Not knowing how things will go for him, but
Right. Oh, yeah.
and he was like the perfect Phil Jackson player, like
Right.
big butt, like playing the post. It's very
Fundamentally strong.
very Phil Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so then the Sixers take Okafor, and I remember the whole energy in the room just went like it was just like everybody's like, what? And everybody's screaming like, what just happened? Why would they take him? They have Embiid. They have Noel. Like, why would they take a third center?
Right.
And then like
Very processy now that you think about it, right? That it was just like, whatever.
So then you got
let's see what we
everybody
can
in
get.
the room, then everybody's confused, and everybody's like, oh my God, did they take Porzingis? Did they take... Then people started chanting Moutier.
Yep.
People started chanting for Moutier.
People
And-
forget, man.
Mhm.
People
People
back
started-
then.
People
yeah.
were excited about Winslow, maybe. I'm hearing like people all around. I was up in the cheap seats, so people are like hooting and hollering about like, maybe this guy, that guy. And then they take Porzingis, and I will say I didn't clap, but I just kind of went like this. But then everybody else booed, and I felt really bad for him. And then he went up, and they do those little interviews on the little stage. I clapped for him then, and I was like, you know what, man? He's ours now. We're good. Like, whatever he is, he is. He's tall. He can shoot the ball. We'll figure it out from there. And then, as Jeremy said, his rookie year, you really saw some stuff where you're like, damn, all right. Like, this guy does everything. He seems like he could score the ball. He could shoot from deep. His conditioning and size was always, and it seems will always be an issue. But at the time it seemed too like, if this guy bulks out, we can start playing him as center,
right?
Which he still is reluctant to do to this day, which is part of why I'm not super heartbroken about not having him anymore. But yeah, obviously, I mean, I'm sure we're about to get into it, but things went south, which is why this is more of a negative than a positive. But at the time, it felt very positive for sure.
It did. It felt like we had gone through a decade of just not having picks and not really having any young talent. People look at the Knicks today and we're just young and bad, but we were old and bad for such a long time. KP kind of felt like, we got young guys. We're going to do this young thing now. And then he comes out, he has that putback dunk on LaMarcus Aldridge, and everything just kind of builds on from there. But I'm going to give myself credit too. While I said the Latvian stick, I remember as soon as he did his interview, I'm like, I like this kid. Like, because he straight up said,
embraced New York.
Yeah, he embraced it, and you seemed to understand why he was booed, and it wasn't personal, and he seemed motivated to prove them wrong.
It's funny how his like character changed so much over the course of the years, because he started off very much like, I understand why I got booed. I'm going to do better. And by the end, it was like, I can do no wrong. How dare you question me about anything? How dare you question if I can sprint down a track? Like,
oh God. But we're gonna fast forward here because we're gonna talk in the middle about him, because that's the beginning, but the end of KP and the end of this whole era. And it's crazy because if you told someone when he tore his ACL dunking on Giannis in February 6th, 2018, I think, that would be the last time he played for the Knicks, I think at that point everyone would have been shocked. I remember that year he had a couple injuries. He had that elbow thing, and I remember he twisted his ankle really bad against the Heat, and I thought that was it. When he twisted, I'm like, oh God, that was horrible.
That was when the lizard thing came.
Yeah, the lizard thing came out
because he was back like the next game,
right? And he was like, he's never going to be injured, whatever. Yeah. And even when he went down, I didn't immediately. I'm like, the lizard. I was buying the lizard hype. But the ACL tear happens, and that literally just starts the entire downfall of KP in New York from every standpoint. I mean,
you could argue it started before.
I was going to say, you can argue it already started, considering the skipped exit meeting, but I can tell, in my opinion, even up to that point, I don't think he was considering leaving or even not being in New York.
It seemed like he was incredulous to the fact that they would even entertain the idea of getting rid of him.
Right, and that as well.
He had heard that Phil Jackson was entertaining offers for him, and that got him bent out of shape.
With the Celtics stuff the year before, By this point, he's in he was in his, not his prime or anything yet, but he had shown the best play he had shown so far. He had a little MVP with the quotation mark stretch for like 10 games to start that season. And he actually was playing a little bit better coming up to that Bucks game. He had started kind of improving again. And then he goes down. Talk about the air being sucked out of the building. Were any of you guys? I was not at that game.
I was not.
Yeah, but I remember watching home. What was that like watching that at home for you?
I mean, the air went out of the room for you at the arena when you saw him drafted. There really wasn't that much air, at least in terms of people in my living room when I was the only one watching it. But for me, it was gone. I mean, at that moment, you kind of think like, all right, maybe he just twisted it badly or something. He's come back. You see him writhing in pain. You're like, okay, this isn't great, but like you're saying, he's a lizard. He'll come back from this.
Yeah.
And then he's walking it off, and when you see the report of him walking and he's fine, you think like, okay, well, if it were really a torn ACL, would he be able to walk on that? Turns out, yes, you absolutely can.
Oh yeah.
And
turns out you can do a lot on a torn ACL. I'm not getting into that.
Rondo finished playing a game on a torn ACL.
Yeah.
Remember that?
That's true.
He
thought Clay tried to come back and do it.
Clay took it,
No, he came back in, if I remember right. He thought he just twisted it, and he's like, nah, I'm finishing this game. And then they MRI'd him after the game, like, oh, you tore your ACL, you're out.
Yeah, but it's crazy just going back to that moment, because you could not have anticipated where things would have ended up. It was like, he's going to do his rehab. I wasn't even that worried about the rehab, which is weird. I'm like, okay, we'll tank it out. We'll get a pick. KP's going to now get a top 3 guy or whatever to play with him. He's going to love it. It's going to be great. But in the end, last game he's ever played for the Knicks, and the I would say maybe the second beginning of the end for KP, because he had those issues from the year before, and we'll talk about that as well. Let's move on a bit. We're going back in time a little bit further to the Chauncey Billups amnesty, which is one of the most interesting ones for us. You know, Vivek, who you see, he's popping up in the video somewhere when I edit, but he's a little bit more apologetic about it, considering everything that was going on at the time. Because there are a lot of like nuances about when this happened and the lockout that make it not as bad as it seems on just the onset. But you know, what are your thoughts on the Billups amnesty? Because they basically they picked up his option in July, lockout, no basketball until Christmas Day, and they used the amnesty clause that was created from the lockout immediately before we even played a game. I think six months after picking up an option. Which allowed us to get Tyson Chandler and blah, blah, blah. But in terms of that specifically, what are your thoughts on just the Billups amnesty today, looking back?
I guess I'm sort of with Vivek a little bit in terms of being a little bit apologetic about it, because there was a lot. I mean, the whole reason that Melo had to get traded when he did and not sign as a free agent that offseason was because of the unsureness about the lockout. And it was one of the longest... one of the longest lockouts in NBA history, right? I mean, the one in '99.
I think the '99 one was longer because it was January. It got
that
past
lasted till January,
or February
right?
even. But but it was pretty long. You got to Christmas Day was opening night.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
it's
like,
crazy.
Yeah, it is kind of good. That was like the best Christmas gift ever. I remember I wrote a column about that in college on my college newspaper. I was like, the best Christmas gift I've ever gotten.
Basketball
the NBA coming
back
on Christmas Day. But yeah, it was like you couldn't fault them for picking the option up. But you had to figure they at least had an idea that maybe Chandler would be on the radar.
Right.
And if they knew that, then just decline him. Because it's not like Billups was his peak self anyway. You know, that's the part.
And he didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
I remember that. He did not want to be. He was upset that he
didn't want to be part of it. Well, because he was comfortable in Colorado.
He's from
Colorado.
Yep.
He went to college there, everything else, right? And so he was comfortable being there. He didn't want to be in New York. And so then the Knicks pick up his option. But he wasn't even his peak self. He wasn't even that good, like, in the playoffs that year.
He got injured, too.
Yeah, he got injured, couldn't really play. Like, you know, it was a big mess. And, like, that's the part where I'm like, crap. But, like, you can't really fault him for picking up the talent and with the unsureness of the upcoming, you know.
With the lockout and everything.
Yeah. You didn't know what the salary cap was going to look like. There's a lot of worry that the salary cap was going to go way down. As it turns out, I think it actually went up after the lockout. Like, the players got a lot more out of that deal than they thought they were going to.
At the time,
in the negotiation. And, you know, that's still playing out to this day. Like, the players have a lot more freedom now. The salary cap is a lot larger now. And it's continued to get larger, and the revenue share from TV deals and everything else is, like, through the roof for the players.
I mean, look at the cap from 2010 to now.
Yeah.
Not
it's
even
insane.
comparable.
It used to be, like, $60 million, and now it's, like, $110.
Yeah.
You know, it's insane. It's almost doubled in the last, like, 6 years. So, you know, I couldn't really fault them, but it's still... It stung when you started to look at it then, and then you have the whole, we're going to get to it, but the whole Amari thing.
Right.
You know, then that's where that really kicked you in the butt, was like, when you're like, wow, we could have had this and kept it in our back pocket in case Amari's knees totally bailed, which they did.
Yep.
And you didn't. You just wasted it in the first 5 minutes to go sign Tyson Chandler, who ultimately didn't move the baseline enough to actually make you a title contender with your two cornerstones, Melo and Amari. So,
in the end, your thoughts on just the use of the amnesty then and Billups in general?
Yeah.
You know.
Alex said a lot of it perfectly. I was of the belief that you're probably not going to get 5 years out of Amari. So if that's the case, keep it in your back pocket. You don't have to use it. Mm-hmm. I do kind of wish that they hadn't picked up Billups' option in the first place, considering the fact he didn't really want to be in New York, considering how if you're on the fence about it, you know, you can always try to strike a deal later. It just, I get it, but at the same time,
it reminded me a lot of, like, as a kid, like, when you, like, do some chores and get a $20 bill, and you're like, and, like, the first thing you want to do is run to the store and spend it.
Yeah.
And your parents are like, you know, you can hold that for later, right? And you're like, no, I need
$20.
I need the video game right now. I need Pokemon in my life, you know, whatever. Like, you know, you need to use it. Like, you can't hold on to that, you know. And that's how they were with that amnesty clause. Like, just pass it back out.
It was such an amazing thing to have, and like to use it so soon. That's horrible. Where is Derrick Rose? It almost felt like more Knicks stuff. Of course, we have a player disappear off the face of the earth for Was it like 5 hours, I guess?
It was like a whole day.
Yep.
It was like a whole day. Did we not know? We didn't know after the game?
You didn't know it through game time.
Wow, yeah.
They
I
didn't know
remember.
where he was even during the game. He just was gone, if I remember right. And then the next day it was like, oh, he went home to be with his family, blah, 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 family emergency, whatever.
I'll be honest, I was nervous. I thought they'd find him maybe hurt, or I thought it could have been
Dead.
something.
Like,
I didn't want to say dead, but like honestly, I'm like, you
feel
just
like-
can't get someone.
Yeah,
I'm like,
you feel like, it's so funny. It's such a 2010s problem. It's so apt that it comes up on the 2010s episode,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Because it's such a 2010s problem. Now we just assume that you can always reach somebody at any time. If this is
Yeah.
like 1975, they'd be like,
That's so
where'd he
true.
go? I don't know. He's just,
Clyde was at a bar.
he he got a little too drunk the night before and
Right.
slept in, slept past practice or whatever. But, it's like now it's like, oh my God, we haven't been able to reach him for like 8 hours. He must be dead. Like,
But it's kind of crazy because it's like unprecedented. I can't think of. I mean, in the comments, let me know if I'm missing something, or if you guys. I can't think of any time you just couldn't find a player.
Yeah, I mean, the basketball world is very different from, or professional sports is very different from our day-to-day life. But
Right.
if you leave and you don't tell your boss, they're going to assume something bad happened to you. And so for this game, I was actually at the game. And I was looking at
Wow.
the court, and because I was with a friend of mine who's a Nets fan, and of course the Pelicans.
not a friend.
It's not. It's yeah, exactly. He's great, but he's a Nets fan, so
Yeah.
whatever.
We all have our faults, right?
Exactly. Of course. I see the best in people, but the Pelicans blew out the Knicks. But before then, I was looking at the pregame and people warming up, and I was like, "That's weird. Rose isn't here." I see literally everyone, and I'm starting to count the actual players. I'm like, Derrick Rose isn't here, and no one's really saying anything. Is he?
So did
is he
no
in the
one
locker
knew
room?
at the?
No one in the
Okay.
arena knew.
Right.
Or at the Garden, it was basically just like okay, whatever, and then the starting lineup is announced, and it's like, oh wow, okay, Rose isn't here, and then you start to see people on Twitter. It's like, what's going on? Where is he? What happened? And then this continues. So the entire game, I'm just scrolling through Twitter, updating, or see what's going on, because I'm curious about if the beat writers are commenting on it, if the team makes an announcement, something, and there's just nothing. And then of course with the team losing, it's just like a really awful affair. So you're thinking the worst about what could happen. You're hoping for the best, of course, and then seeing what's going on the court, it was just a nightmare.
yeah.
Yeah, it was weird and scary, and that season had been this weird like one step forward, 4 steps back kind of thing, where you were like, are they gonna figure it out? The talent should have been there, and then the Rose thing to me just kind of like climaxed how bad everything ended up.
Who wound up starting? Was it Jennings in that game? That must
think
have been
it was.
terrible.
It was
Yikes. Yeah.
Mr. bringing the 90s back, clapping, playing defense, and being an idiot. Yeah. He got tossed out in preseason, I remember. Did he get tossed out that year?
Yeah, it was
Against
with the Wizards.
Well,
The Wizards.
He was only with us for 1 year, so you can pretty much narrow it down.
So it has to be that time. What's up with us and like getting tossed out against the Wizards in preseason?
And Mitch had beef the year prior.
Oh,
Yeah,
we
was
did
the
with
Wizards
Keith.
fan. Yeah.
Wow, we just unearthed
Markeith,
something.
right?
Yeah,
with
Keith.
Markeith.
Yeah.
And then Marcus gets tossed the next year. It's just like a Morris Brothers
Ha.
thing. And Brandon Jennings thing, apparently. I don't know.
But yeah,
Casper Ware.
the Rose thing was weird. You know what else was weird? Amari Stoudemire after the first year. So interesting because I remember around, we bomb out in free agency, which we will be talking about as well. And we get Amari, and we're going to talk about the good of Amari as well, because he did bring something to this franchise, especially early on. But the Suns would not match the deal. They wanted opt-outs, right?
They wanted
Based on
big time insurance.
insurance on his knees.
To make it non-guaranteed.
Right, to make it exactly. And I remember knowing that and being like, yeah, he's had that microfracture surgery. Like, I know he's kind of messed up, but it's Amari Stoudemire. I'm like, we'll get 3 good years at least. And we really got one. It's if you really look back, not even one. Like, we got like 7 months because even when Melo came, it was the rough fit, and then he got injured in the playoffs, and then he was never ever really the same, even though he worked on his post moves.
Yeah.
Amari, after year one, I felt like what happened with Melo as well is Amari just kind of weighed Melo down just by him being a max contract and not living up to anything close to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of weighed the roster down. If you weighed the salary cap. He wasn't a horrible player when he was able to play. Except for, I guess like he had his stretches where when he would be coming back from so many injuries, he'd have so much rust. They'd try to put him in a featured role again, and you're like, he can't do that right now. He's got to get eased in. And, then like Woodson's insistence on playing him in that 2012-13 playoffs, which, was kind of a mistake as well, given the fact that he hadn't been healthy for almost the whole year, which was why Melo was at the 4 to begin with. And all that stuff. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things added up, but you know, it was. I feel bad looking back on Amari's career like that, because he was another guy, like we talked about. Melo wanted to be here.
He did,
took on the
yep.
mantle, you know, and we're gonna talk more in a minute about how, you know, Amari like really put it upon himself to be like our savior. You know what I mean? And he wanted to prop this team up, and he wanted to attract stars here, and all this other stuff, and it just kind of never happened because his knees wouldn't let it happen, and. It's unfortunate. He was a victim of a sort of controversial and ultimately now like blacklisted surgery in the NBA. The microfracture.
Oh yeah, from like
the microfracture. Basically, it was like they would. I don't even fully know how it works, but basically in the cartilage they would almost like put like holes in it or something to try to make it like more
like flexible, malleable,
or flexible
right?
or something.
Okay.
I don't know, but all it ended up doing was just making your knees like go like bone on bone after a while, and it was just a horrible idea. I don't know why they ever thought that was a good idea, but that's basically what Amari went through. So and
we got the 1 year.
It was like a Band-Aid. It would give you better performance for like a year or two. They discovered, and then because like guys were being like, oh, this makes my knee feel great, and then a year or two later they'd be like, oh my god, I can't walk.
You know, one thing I'll say, and kind of goes off both of your points, is that in the end though, Amari's, as bad as it was past the first year, he got a 4-year max? It was a 4-year max.
5 years.
It was 5, right?
5 years, over $100 million.
Yeah. Yep. But one thing is that, generally speaking, I think his perception amongst Knicks fans is pretty positive. Mm-hmm. Like, as much as you know, and injury is something that's not in your control, and Amari, like, he really worked to come back every time.
I think we felt bad for him.
We felt bad too. Yeah. But like you said, man, back then when the salary cap's 60, 70 mil and someone's making 20 and just not playing, that was so damaging to the team. I remember thinking, you know, even in 2012-13, or even before that, the Lin years and stuff like that, I'm like, man, imagine if we had 20 million free. Like what you could give Melo, another wing defender, another big man, whatever. So
I mean, because you had, essentially for those years where you had Melo, Amari, and Tyson, you had Melo and Amari both making about $20 million each, and then you had Tyson making like 15.
Yeah.
And so really you had like 55 out of your $70 million tied up just in 3 players.
And then one was not playing, one was not always broken.
Yeah. So it made it really difficult to fill out the rosters that year.
Yep. Yeah. So getting a bit more recent, and this is just public embarrassment that's still going on in a weird way. Knick legend Charles Oakley being tossed out the Garden. You're sighing heavy, so we're going to go to Alex first. I mean, it's no matter, you know, I don't think Oakley is an angel in this, of course, but just the entire look is bad, whatever angle you look at it from.
Ultimately, it's just bad optics. It's like, James Dolan, stop being such a goddamn baby, man. Like, stop being such a child all the time. Like, I understand. Apparently, Oakley was like a little drunk and was heckling him, you know, and to hear James Dolan, it was like he was blackout. I would imagine he probably had a couple cocktails, and then he's just like, hey, fuck you, Dolan, you know, whatever. Like, probably just started yelling at him, you know, and then John, because that's what a 90s Knicks player would do, I guess.
Right,
you know, that's what you expect out of them when he doesn't like Dolan, you know.
It all adds up.
I mean, because the whole thing was that Dolan didn't like him, and so therefore wouldn't give him, like, the once a Knick, always Knick treatment, like, you know, Spreewell, like Larry Johnson, like John Starks, whatever.
My mom thinks they live under the Garden, by the way.
Yeah,
she's like, they live there and they bring them up.
It seems like it, yeah. But he didn't get that treatment, so he had to buy his own seat to the Garden, you know. And I think he was pissed about that.
So that already just kind of,
and that already kind of was bubbling, and you know, but for James Dolan then to make a whole scene out of it, he sent like the whole Knicks SS after him to like come to his seat and like escort him out. Apparently they like manhandled him a little bit, and like he kind of stumbled and hit his leg or something. And I don't know. It's like you could get a million different accounts, because it seems like only like 1 or 2 people actually got any of it on video, because nobody really knew what was going on at the time.
Right.
But it was just embarrassing. It's just like, just live with it, man. Oh my God, the amount of times James Dolan must get heckled every time he's at the Garden. Like, what are you gonna do throughout the whole building? Like, come on, man.
I mean, you keep wondering if it's gonna get to that point.
He's gonna start clearing sections.
Right. Get out of there. And then the weird thing about it is that it's still going on. In a weird way, it's also pushed Oakley towards Brooklyn. Maybe not voluntarily. I'm sure the Nets have been smart enough to use that in marketing. But it kind of sucks that Oakley, you know, even with his fault, it just sucks that you have like such a amazing Knicks legend, and now has this weird beef with the franchise. Not really the franchise, but this is animosity in the air, and it's still going on today.
Yeah, and it's a shame that one situation with a former player overshadows that of all the good, like with Spreewell, who came back. The fact that you've got all these other guys who really are diehard faithfuls, and that's something that's great. But I agree, there's the only good that came of this was for the tabloids to be able to post about it. And it's a shame because, yes, for Oakley, you don't go into someone else's home and then be belligerent and cause a ruckus. But if you're Dolan, retaliation is really not the solution here.
Yeah.
And it's just a shame that there was egg on everyone's faces, and it's awful.
Just have thicker skin, James Dolan, is basically the moral of the story.
And look at it, right? Who gets the worst of that? The Knicks as a franchise.
Yeah.
Because Oakley, in a weird way, like he's fine. Dolan has other things, but the Knicks took the biggest L out of all.
And Knicks fans.
And that's speaking. Oh, the Knicks fans, right? Like it's weird now. It's weird that Oakley became this weird figure for us when he represented so much of what it meant to be a Knick.
It's kind of crazy because Dolan's mended fences with a lot of people that he had issues with on the team, whether it was Free, whether it was guys like Kurt Thomas, guys like Bernard King, many Jeff Van Gundy amongst other people. And I thought that maybe there's a glimmer of hope that something can happen, because it's not Oakley. He used to come to Knick games in the 2000s, so it's not like there was always bad blood. So maybe they can find a resolution sometime into the next decade.
Another L, double L that we've collected, free agency. So it's interesting because the decade is bookmarked by two massive L's. Actually, if you're looking in real life, you could actually make a bookmark of two L's and put books in between of the Knicks for the 10 years there. Free agency, we have the decision in 2010, and then I don't know what you want to call this one. Is there a name for this one? For summing it up?
The Instagram story? I don't know.
Whatever it is.
So, the decision. I mean, I don't know if I'm necessarily... I don't know if it's necessarily the worst moment or if it's a sad moment, but I think the 2010 decision is a lot worse than the decision we dealt with last year, or at least this past year, because I thought with the 2010 decision, we gave up draft capital in order to pursue LeBron. And that included the 2012 first round pick, which ended up being the 15th overall pick. And yeah, the draft wasn't that good, but we could have used that pick, in a trade if we wanted to, potentially acquire CP3 or someone along those lines. But I mean, I thought we could have been a lot more creative leading up to that decision. Because Donnie Walsh basically, he made all his moves, in anticipation for it, which was, drafting Jordan Hill, and then making that trade to trade Hill and the pick and a bunch of other people essentially for McGrady's contract. And I mean, it was just kind of a weird year. I thought that could have been maneuvered a whole lot better.
But we're gonna start with the decision, Jeremy. Let's just go back to 2010. LeBron, the trade, which drafted Jordan Hill, traded him a couple months after to get your boy. Shout out to T-Mac. But really going all in on this idea of 2010, doing things, whatever, and now how much that conditioned us. There's just so much to unpack about this. But let's go back to 2010, the decision. Your thoughts?
The one thing I think of, one of the biggest what ifs for me is, what if Melo had listened to LeBron and instead of taking that guaranteed final year of his deal, had an opted out with LeBron, and then LeBron's got more options. I mean, look, it's a sort of thing where it felt like Miami, it felt like Chicago, and then maybe there's a situation where the Knicks might present themselves. But I think the one thing LeBron didn't really have, number one in Cleveland was another star player who could really be with. But two was a great supporting cast. And it seemed like both those things were integral to what he wanted. So for the Knicks, they cleared enough space. You could get a guy like Bosch. You could try to pry Wade out, but that's going to be harder when they've got all this cap space to begin with. But then it was also not having the supporting cast in place that really could do something. And you could say the Heat didn't really have that either, and they added pieces, but it seemed like they did it in a way like, they still had Haslam, and the players even sacrificed a little bit in order to get the Mike Miller type and guys. So it's just, it felt like, I understand, but really there was no significant plan B, because going back to Amare, it's just, you just threw max money at a guy with no insurance, because it's like, well, we promised so much.
Yeah.
We have to do something here. And it's moves like that just really makes it feel even worse.
Yeah.
So it's just a mess all around.
I mean, people talk about, this past summer, us the franchise promising. I disagree with that, But 2010, there were felt like promise. I remember like the idea that LeBron was coming here was so much more overwhelming even than the KD stuff ended up being. Maybe the KD stuff probably had more legs to it, to be honest. Before the Achilles or whatever.
Here's the difference.
Yeah.
Is that the LeBron stuff was mostly like perpetuated by LeBron. The KD stuff was mostly perpetuated by the media.
By the media, yep.
So when ultimately KD didn't come, we can look at it and say, oh, the media misled us. You know, they kept telling us, they kept saying it's a guarantee that Durant is going to come, whatever. When LeBron didn't come, it was like LeBron's talked for years about how he loves New York. He's a huge Yankees fan. He goes to a Cleveland Indians game wearing a Yankees hat.
Yep.
Like
the decision was in Connecticut.
The decision was in Connecticut, like 20 minutes from New York. You know what I mean? It's like it all was lined up like so perfectly, and like. I don't know. I still remember that day very vividly because I was playing like a men's league basketball league with my friends that summer, right? And we had a game scheduled for during the decision, and I was so pissed about that. So it's like, I swear to God, if I have to miss, this is gonna be like the biggest moment of my life if he picks the Knicks.
See what you did, LeBron?
Yeah,
the biggest moment of his life.
Ruined it. But I'm like, this is gonna be like such an awesome moment. This is gonna be like one of my best moments ever as a Knicks fan, and I'm playing this game, right? And like LeBron's decision, if I remember right, was at 7, and my game started at like 6:30. And so I had some friends there or whatever, some of which had phones and stuff on them. I was like, I swear to God, if any of you say anything about the decision, I don't want to hear about it during the game. Okay. If he doesn't pick the Knicks, I'm going to be devastated, and I'm not going to want to move. And so then literally, I'm playing. You know, my team wasn't very good, so we were getting our asses kicked. But I'm out there, I'm playing, whatever, it's fun. And my one friend yells from the side, LeBron picked Miami. And I'm like, ah! I literally subbed myself out of the game. And I laid behind like the bench chairs for like 20 minutes.
LeBron doesn't know what he did.
Like,
you gotta tell him. We're gonna send this to you, LeBron. You gotta know what you did to this man's life.
Dude, I was devastated. I sat there, I laid down on the floor for a while, then I like got back up and I sat in a chair just like this for like another quarter. Finally subbed myself back in the fourth or whatever, just to play a little more, I guess, and it was terrible.
So for me, I'm going to sound like a huge nerd here, whatever. I'm going to embrace it. That summer, I was at French immersion camp.
Hey, listen, I minored in French in college, so I respect that.
Exactly. And hey, like, you know, it got me all through a year of high school, like perfect grades for French. So it was worth it. It's great. But, so I'm there, right? And I have no access really to the internet. And the rule is if you get caught speaking English 3 times, you're out.
Wow.
Crazy stuff.
Okay.
But so, it's the decision, and we're trying to find out.
Le decision.
Right, exactly.
What did you yell?
So then, you know, like, of course.
Sacre bleu.
Exactly. It was like, oh mon dieu. Qu'est-ce que c'est? And then, of course, we find out, and I'm just like, mad. And then it's just a nightmare. And then, of course, we were speaking English. Because there was a guy who was a Bulls fan. I felt worse for him, honestly. I mean, I felt bad for myself, but it was the sort of thing where I thought Chicago was actually a more viable solution than New York. So, it hurt personally. And then, of course, when I finally got my phone back to call my parents, I saw notifications like, the Knicks signed Amari. And I'm like, oh, great. And I was like, oh, wait, his knees. No, this is not going to go over very well.
The Knicks signed Amari like a number of days before the decision, though, right? Because people were thinking that they did it so quickly to try to...
It was like the 7th or 8th.
Yeah, because LeBron had asked for Amari the year prior in Cleveland.
I remember that with the trade rumors with Phoenix.
And they ended up getting Jameson or whatever.
Yeah, Antoine.
Because they couldn't strike a deal for Amari, so they traded for Antoine Jameson. Yeah.
And one thing, funny enough, I actually think the LeBron sweepstakes was the beginning of Nick Photoshops. I can't remember Nick Photoshops. Yeah. I remember the one so vividly. I see him in the 6. I remember it so well.
In this style jersey.
In that style. It was a Boston Photoshop. Yeah. It was in the Boston Garden. So, there we go.
Thank God memes weren't a thing then.
Oh,
that
God.
was much. I mean, like, they're bad now, but think about it.
Yeah. The 20. Let's move on. Andrea Bargnani.
Air Bargs.
You have the trade, which is just bad. 2 picks. I'm going to go into the trade specifically. He's bad when he's here. He has the Air Bargs moment. Oof. I think in a weird way with the KP stuff, he already conditioned us to be wary of KP.
Yes.
Obviously, there's other things that would have done that too, but Bargs.
One of my favorite memories is, of course, in Milwaukee, close game, about 9 seconds left, takes the shot, and you just hear Clyde going, "What is he doing, folks?" I just lost it, and that's the point where, and I'm pretty sure that the Knicks did win that game, so all was absolved, but at the same time, it's like
Pure stupidity.
Dude,
Up with the ball.
dumb.
Bargnani trade, that was a disaster from the start. The moment I heard that the deal was going to be done, I mean, I think everybody was just like, what is going on here? I think that's what everybody was saying. They were equally confused, and they were shocked. What are the Knicks doing? And I think the big thing that shocked a lot of fans was just the amount of draft capital that was given up. Not only did we give up the 2016 first-round pick swap that we had for the Nuggets via the Melo trade, but we also gave up 2 second-round picks, one in 2014 and one in 2017. And one of those second-round picks eventually became Jonah Bolden, who's on the Sixers. So if there's actually one thing that's a overarching theme of the 2010s, it was we eventually figured out to stop giving up first-round picks, midway through the decade. But throughout the entire decade, we've just been giving up second-round picks like no tomorrow. And especially in a year like last year, that second-round pick was basically a late first-round pick. So, we thought we were playing it cautious, and we were playing it safe by not dealing firsts and just dealing seconds. But those seconds came back to bite us when we could have actually used those second-round picks.
I'll just give one positive memory of Andrea Bargnani. They did a Twitter video or whatever of the Knicks doing famous movie quotes, and they made the little school from Zoolander, and they had Bargnani. He had to give the Zoolander line from that.
Yeah,
and he goes, "What is this? A school for ants?" Oh, and I loved it. I don't know. I thought it was hilarious. That's the number one thing that sticks in my. I tried to block out most of the rest, but I loved the line. What is this? A school for ants? He had a very Italian accent. It's hilarious.
And the thing is with Barg, just to wrap up really quickly, is what's so messed up? I was a little excited because I knew the trade with the picks. I was pissed about that. But after what happened in 12-13, I'm like, Bargs can maybe hit a three. I'm like, Melo's going to take attention. He might hit open threes. That could work.
I tried to talk myself into him being like a super Steve Novak. Which
right,
obviously was not true at all.
I know. And he was a number one overall pick. And he had some solid-ish years in Toronto. It wasn't like he was a full bust. But alas, here we are. And then what I think is kind of, it's not all bad. I mean, maybe it is. But this kind of was really the defining thing of the decade. The Phil Jackson years, which led to us keeping picks, but also led to a Joakim Noah signing, public spats, just a lot. Thoughts on Phil? Was it Goink?
How's it
Goink?
Yeah, it was funny because it felt like a return to normalcy, but it's crazy how keeping picks, we applauded that when that's just something everyone should be doing.
Right.
And so with Phil, it's like I mean, with really all executives, you kind of have to evaluate the 3 ways that they go about things: free agency, trade, and the draft. And it seemed that he drafted well, at least keeping the picks. That was great. Trades, it felt like a mixed bag. And then, of course, free agency, which is really the Achilles heel, and things kind of just reversed on itself. The one thing that I always think of with the Phil era was he always wanted Melo out. And then it must have been Dolan, because then all of a sudden it was a massive 180 where Phil said to Melo, "Am I moving fast enough for you? What can I do more?" And it's like, well, now you're stuck in between a rock and a hard place because you wanted a completely different direction, and there's an immovable piece, and you're just building around him and going all in when that's not your plan to begin with. So, though I really wish that when Joakim Noah had offered Phil Jackson on the street to do a pull-up on his arm, he had done it, because
then you see that he couldn't. Oh man, we were competing against no one that summer for Noah as well, which just made it. But
fortunately, we only got 53 games of Noah, and it was almost self-inflicted wounds that really ruined his time with us. And that included the PED suspension, that included the fight with Hornacek, and then, once that happened, that was the beginning of the end. And then the front office just didn't care about him anymore. So, unfortunately, we still feel the impact of that contract because he's still on our books after we stretched him. But, it just sucks because I really wanted to root for him. And we got barely a half a year out of Noah.
But the Phil years were just, like you said, it felt at first like, oh, we got Phil Jackson. Mm-hmm. This is elite basketball mind. And his obviously his coaching career is locked away. But it's weird how his Knicks tenure is hurt his stock. And obviously he was at fault for much of it. It's not like, it's just a Knicks thing on him. But look how it ended up.
All right, I'm going to address the camera directly. So here's a hot take. You ready?
All right.
Phil Jackson was not that bad at basketball decisions. All in all.
Okay, I would.
All in all, he was a good drafter.
Yep.
The biggest, he made some okay free agency signings. Obviously, the Noah one is a huge blemish, but that one, everybody was spending money like it was water that year because the cap spiked. Everybody figured, this is going to be the new normal. This is how much guys are going to get paid now. And obviously that wasn't the case, and Noah's contract was still an albatross, and he declined, historically, really, really just went from a somewhat serviceable player to just, a dumpster fire in about 2 seconds flat. But, I think his drafting decisions were great. And he made, Kyle O'Quinn signed him, pretty good signing.
Great, really good contract, too.
Yeah,
excellent contract.
Was fine. The Rose trade catches heat from some people, but I actually thought it was a calculated risk, and it was worth taking.
Yeah, with Jerry and, who was it Jerry and Grant? Who went up for
Jerry and Grant and Rolo, actually. Yeah, and that was basically all it cost.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was a worthy risk, I guess. Ultimately Rose didn't work out and, didn't have the same work ethic, especially on defense, that he had ever had before. But, all in all, I didn't think it was, the worst decision in the world. I think, when we look back on Jeff Hornacek now, I don't think that he was necessarily the worst coach in the whole world.
Right.
But he was definitely bad. The worst thing, though, with Phil was that he did not know how to conduct himself in the media and how to represent himself to his players. And that is what made him and the Knicks during his tenure an embarrassment. And that's why he's, near the tops of our list of worst things to happen in this decade, is because he was publicly taking jabs at Melo, who at the time was his star player that he had re-signed himself and given a no-trade clause to, and everything else, pulled out all the stops to re-sign him. He makes comments, even just little comments. It's you have to understand where you are. Saying that the ball sticks to his hands too much, that means you're saying he's a ball hog.
Yep.
And that's how it's going to play in the media. And you can't do that in this town. You can't be giving them, you can't be throwing scraps
more
to the sharks
out there,
because
they will. Oh, man.
Because they'll eat them right up.
Yeah.
And there was that. There was the whole KP thing, obviously, leaking that he was looking at trades for KP, and it's just keep that.
He might be too tall.
Yeah.
We had him, I think it was pretty early, and he's he might be too tall for the NBA, but we'll see.
It's stop.
Yeah.
He absolutely, he had Charlie Rosen essentially be his mouthpiece. Yeah. Trashed J.R. Smith and Shump after he traded them. That's a bad look. You never want to do that. It was Charlie Rosen wrote it, but it was Phil. Phil gave him those quotes directly, and it's just it was just bad looks all around. That's the thing. As a basketball executive, he could have been a lot worse. He left the team in an okay spot when he left, as far as having some young talent. Because we forget he even drafted Dotson. He drafted Frank.
Yep.
Who Frank, is polarizing or whatever, but I think we can agree he's turning a certain corner this year and starting to look like a better player, like what we expected.
Whatever Phil saw,
but
it exists in some capacity. Right. It's up to Frank to take it to the next level, but you can see what he saw and why. Yeah.
But so, it's just that he was just so clueless about how to handle himself, and he kept trying to handle being an executive like he did being a coach, and you can't. Yeah. You gotta be more tactful as an executive. You're the guy that's in charge of these guys' livelihood, and he was treating it like he was trying to motivate them with his
his weird zen.
His
there was a assigned reading for the book club.
Yes. Yeah, he did the assigned readings.
Even more with the stories. There's the fact that he was reportedly falling asleep during a draft workout.
Yep.
The whole LeBron posse comment. The fact that he hired Derek Fisher, and Derek Fisher is with his fiance now wife, and you've got Matt Barnes driving an hour away to just beat the shit out of Derrick. So it's and of course it's well, who hired the man? And then the whole issues of where Fisher wouldn't write to him, and then he hires Hornacek, and Hornacek goes up to Billy Hernangomez and hey, tell your friend KP to stop acting like a fucking pussy. And it's
and
stop it.
It's just ridiculous.
Going back to your point, it really feels like he was too old, honestly. He had back issues and all that, but he really should have just been coaching. And you wonder, we didn't even bring up the triangle. And, I imagine, it's funny, I think of Phil with the triangle, I just imagine him holding a triangle with puppet strings just over the franchise over those years. It was this weird dark cloud over us. Is Jeff in a weird position because he wants to run something, but Phil, he has to adhere to what Phil wants. We brought up the Noah contract. It was just all toxic not all toxic, but there was this level of toxicity that just kept going on, and it really just feels like he should have coached, and he should have probably been 5, 6, 7.
I don't even know if he was
point.
healthy enough to do it. That's
That's
the thing. He
He
that's the
lumbered
thing.
so much.
At a certain point, you could have just said, he essentially had like Rambis being his surrogate anyway.
Oh God, Kurt Rambis. Huh?
I mean, Rambis sucked. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
if Phil wanted to coach, they could have worked out some sort of arrangement where he coached home games and Rambis coached the road games or something like that, and it could have just essentially been Phil's mouthpiece if Phil was really not healthy enough to travel. But that's a whole nother story. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing was he should have just hired a coach he could have had faith in and not micromanaged, because
Right.
that was part of what apparently got Fisher out of there too, was the micromanaging. And because Phil had an idea of how he wanted the team coached, but he couldn't do it himself, so he had to use somebody like that. But
Yeah, and someone who has that resume, it's hard for him to let go. He's won, what was it? How many? 6, 7? How many championships has he won?
6.
Insane.
Or-
6, right?
Or
Seven.
no, 11 total.
Right.
Yeah,
No, no,
11
because he has
after
the
the Knicks
No,
ones.
he's 9 as a coach and 2 as a player.
Yeah,
Yeah.
11. Yeah.
And I just remember too, with him being a former Knick, it really felt like, they fixed it. We finally got a really elite basketball talent here, and we all know where it ended. Yeah. I didn't bring up, but that was a series where me and my mom were so pissed off. It's one of my most angriest I've ever been was LeBron getting Tyson kicked out of that game.
Oh, I know. With
in game one,
Yeah.
bro, to
Falling
this
over.
day.
that whole series.
Yeah.
Yo,
That one, he acted like he got shot, though. That was
I
the
was
worst.
so pissed because Shump tore his ACL that game.
Do you
and I'm
remember?
like,
Do you remember that was the one where LeBron went like, and then he sat on the ground like this for like 10 minutes, and the second they called the tech on Chandler, he stood right
got
back
up.
and was like,
Yeah, and they're up 20 something.
Yeah.
It was like the second quarter of LeBron. You're playing the Knicks. It was 1-8. It was
Yeah.
the 1-8. Was it 1-8? 2-7. The playoff matchup.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it was 2-7.
2-7.
Because Indiana
yeah.
was the first seed that year.
Yeah, that was.
Right,
Yeah,
he
that
was.
was the year that Miami.
But-
Also, I realized we forgot one thing for the
Bad. What was it?
Amari punching the fire extinguisher.
Shit.
Ah.
Oh, that's so good.
we could very quickly just.
Or do we want Vivek
You-
to
do
talk
that.
Do you guys
about
want to do it now, or do you want to like save?
We could talk about it right this second and have it almost like a blooper. Like,
Yeah.
just be like, oh my god, we.
Well,
forgot
actually,
about
you're taping, right? I'm 100% keeping in that you
All
forgot.
right, perfect.
Yeah.
And also, if we're gonna talk about names, we got 2010, which is the decision. I feel like 2019's got to be the derision because of the fact that it's like we got clowned so hard with the whole Zion, Katie, and Kyrie situation.
I hate
And it just-
Photoshop. Adobe needs to end that program. All right. But I love that you brought it up. Amari punching. My favorite thing of it is that they went back to the movie The Office. Was Office? What's it called? No, Office Space.
Office Space, yes.
Office Space.
with the printer.
Yes,
They're all
and
beating
they
it up.
edited. That was amazing.
That
But
was a great gift.
Was that Amari punching the fire extinguisher? Right? Was that also when he fake picked up Shane Battier? Do you remember when he? Do you guys remember? Do you remember this?
Maybe. I
think
do remember that. That's
I
one of
think-
my favorite gifts ever.
Yeah, I think Shane Battier was on the ground. I think it's
And Amari goes, oh, I'll
He
help
goes,
you out.
yeah,
And
he pulls back. Okay,
He just turns around and
If
Battier
I'm-
starts like clawing for his shorts.
Listen, if I'm wrong, I'll go back, edit, figure it out. I swear to God, that happened, and then later that night, he punched the fire extinguisher.
Maybe. I
Let's
don't know.
see.
We'll have to check the
But
dates.
you brought it up, so
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
Stupid. I mean, like, it's so
Bro,
dumb. This dude punches a fire extinguisher.
the post back page, wasn't it like him photoshopped with boxing gloves on and a fire extinguisher or something too? I remember that was such a joke.
Like you said, you can't give anything to this media market.
Yeah.
But then, like, kind of on pace with that, you got the J.R. Smith shoe untying.
Shoe on.
Yeah.
And he keeps doing
And
that, and then he
trying
does
to
it
get
again.
the
Right.
That didn't make it on this list either. That's
No,
another-
and then there's also the Melo Rihanna photo where
Yes.
he's like,
Oh,
And the
Mel
J.R.
looking
Smith
at Rihanna.
Rihanna actual photo.
or,
Honey Nut Cheerios? God,
Nut
listen.
Cheerios.
there's
and then
so-
JR tweeting out the photo
Of
of
the
his
girl's
of his
butt,
girl's
yes.
butt.
Oh, you trying to get the pipe?
Well,
Trying to
that was
get
the
that,
other one,
yeah.
trying to get the pipe. That was
So you
a
see,
separate one. And
there-
that girl, I think, was underage. That was awful.
So the bloopers of the bad. I swear to God, this whole list could have been bad. But let's move on to some good stuff. It's Terry and Trey, and you know the vibes. If you like the show,
Please subscribe. And to check out some of our other stuff, click right here.